My name is Rahul Konda. I am 39 years old. Today is April 21st, 2018. We are at the StoryCorps booth in Chicago, Illinois, and I'm here with my friend Adam Soderson.
Hello, Raul. My name is Adam Soderson. I am 38 years old. Today is Saturday, April 21st, 2018. We are here in Chicago, Illinois, and I am Raul Kanda's friend.
Adam, we met like 9 years ago. We were just talking, right?
Nine
This
years.
was when I had to come to Madison, Wisconsin for an internship, and I was looking for a place to live. And I found you guys through the company website that both of us were going to be working at.
Had you been to Madison before?
I did, yeah, for maybe half a day. This
Okay.
was back in my, I think, grad school days, and I was interning in Chicago, and one of the guys I was interning with was from UW.
Sure.
So he took us there, showed us a good time. Loved the city. Fantastic summer. Uh,
Summers make the winter bearable.
I know. I mean, Madison is one of the most fantastic places to be at.
It's a coastal city in the middle of a landlocked
It
state,
is, right,
which
and
is
and
pretty
the,
fun.
and it's like activities by the lake, and just the town is beautiful. The art fairs and just the drives like to different parts of the state and open roads. I loved it. Uh, I especially liked spending time with you guys because that was my first experience. Actually, me being an immigrant and having not spent a lot of time with American families. That
Sure.
whole summer was a truly American, first truly American experience for me. Right.
Memorial Day to Labor Day, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Living with you guys, I got to see firsthand, uh, you know, uh, the small community in America. And Madison, especially where we were, Verona
Yeah.
wasn't a big town, but
No.
everything I heard about, life in, mid America was I was living it for the first time.
It's a
Uh,
real interesting kind of place of community and neighborhood where everybody's, even though Madison's a city of 500,000, more or less, it's still a small town,
yeah, yeah.
especially by standards of where you grew up.
Yes, India is
Yeah.
not small town by any means. Um, yeah, and then you know I got to see how involved you were in your community, be it like volunteering to rebuild your frat house at UW,
Yep.
or being a part of your local community. I mean, you took me to all the local events. It was a great experience,
Yeah, it
fantastic
was
experience.
it was great for us to have somebody we didn't know come and live with us, and we were pretty recently married, maybe married for 3 years at that point.
Yeah,
I think 5, 6, 7. Yeah, the math works out. And so yeah, we had just moved to Wisconsin the year before, moved back, and it was an opportunity at Land's End where we worked, where they said, "Hey, there's summer interns and need a place to live," and we thought, "Yeah, this is great. You know, we have a house, we have plenty of rooms, and we had no idea who we would get, whether it would be a person from Illinois, whether it be a person from the West Coast
you
or
weren't
anything."
expecting anybody from Hyderabad, India, were
We,
you?
we, we didn't know that we were going to get somebody from India. No, that was a surprise to us. And they asked, well, do you have preferences, or do you have, that you want this kind of person? And we said, well, no, anybody who needs a place to live was good enough for us. And so, yeah, and then here we are. We spent the summer together, and we've stayed in touch via social media, which again, I think that's the positive side of social media, that we're able to stay involved in each other's lives and kind of see our families and see us sort of grow as people over the last 9 years.
Yeah, the few things that really stick in my mind about those few months was, I was going through a tough time. My mom was
Right.
diagnosed with cancer, and I remember that. I don't know if you remember, but we had a couple of conversations about this. It really did help me in a weird way. Just I was in the middle of didn't know anybody there.
Right.
Going through a lot of pressure with dealing with a family situation, middle of school,
Right.
loans. My wife wasn't in the same place, so really helped. So that was one thing I remember about living in Wisconsin. Number two was I hadn't met a bigger Cubs fan than you, and this was somebody who lived in
Lives
Wisconsin
in
who
Wisconsin.
had their own baseball team.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about Cubs and your involvement
It's
there.
interesting, and I try to explain this to people who aren't Cubs fans, especially in Wisconsin, where there's a lot of Brewers fans. And I've said, I don't think you understand what it's like to see the Cubs succeed or to win, because it's more than just following a silly sports team. it really does tie a family together. Excuse me. And in my case, I was born in Chicago. My dad is a real strong Cubs fan. My grandmother, who was born in 1917 in Wisconsin, also a real big Cubs fan. So you have three generations of people that share this sort of this common bond. And my grandmother missed seeing them win the World Series by about 18 months or so. She passed away. But stories that we would hear, my grandmother lived on a farm in Wisconsin, and her brothers were huge baseball fans. And this was in the 20s and 30s when the Cubs were playing some pretty good ball. And they were in the World Series every once in a while. They didn't win it, of course, then. But they would be out in the field working, and this is so silly, this analog, but it's just great. They would want to know the score of the Cubs game, and so my grandmother would be in the house working with her mother, and they would hang a colored sheet on a clothing line based on which team was winning at the moment.
Way.
A blue sheet for the Cubs and a red sheet for the Red Sox or whoever they were playing at the time. And so it was my grandmother's job to run out and change the colored sheet. And so her brothers would always be looking back towards the house to see so no idea what inning it was, no idea what the score was, no idea who was pitching, but just this colored sheet. And so I think of that, wow, how cool that is, that this love of this team has spread three generations. And now the fourth, my son, who I've unfortunately dragged to Cubs games, and he went to a game just recently in Milwaukee against the Cubs, and then I took him to opening day at Wrigley. And so it's just magical, and having them win, I think some people say it ruins it because you don't have that hope anymore, or that next year. And I don't think so. I think it was pretty darn cool.
I remember you showing me a piece of brick from the old
so
Cubs stadium,
I have a
which
brick.
I thought was like cool.
Yeah, I have a brick, I have a section of bleacher, and then this is the part that kills me. So when I was, I don't know, about 6 or so, they were renovating Wrigley Field, and they tore out all the old wood seats, and you could get a section of 2 seats for $20. Even back then, that was pretty cheap, and a section of 3 for $35. And my dad bought it. We went down to Wrigley, it was like on February, and the place was closed. You climbed around these seats. Yeah, here's my 2. And people would hoard them and then put them on eBay, and
Right.
you'd gouge somebody for the price of it. Well, then there were no eBay, so you just bought what you had, and they floated around our garage for years, and I just loved these seats. Well, my sister built a home and asked for them, and they were just sitting in my parents' garage, and she wanted to incorporate it into her entryway as her seats. And my dad said, well, of course, no one wants them. And who was I to say no? But my sister now has these very, very cool vintage Wrigley Field seats, and every time I go to her house, I remind her that I was the one that helped drag him to the car as a 6-year-old. But it's good that she has them too, and I get to sit in them and when I go there.
I mean, one of my favorite videos of all time on my Facebook feed was you kind of breaking down and kind of showing your 4-year-old son the TV when the Cubs won the World Series.
He was 3, and I had read some things earlier on that said, you can take pictures after this, but really the thing that you want is record your reaction, right? And so I just set up a phone and pointed it towards us to get our reaction to that final out, which obviously anybody who's a Cubs fan knows that was a crazy game to begin with. And then that final out I went and woke him up with 1 out left and took him down, and then the Indians got a hit, and my friend said, put him back to bed, man, he's going to jinx it. And luckily he didn't jinx it. But I think any idea of recording your reaction is cool. My family recently went down to Tennessee for the full eclipse, and which was amazing, and we set up a camera to record our reaction of watching it go dark, and that's better than any of the pictures we have because it's very cool.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm sure Dane will grow up to be as big of a Cubs fan as you.
He won't have a choice.
That brings us to the third thing I really remember or will stick in my mind about you for time infinity is January 19th of every year. I see this post from you on Facebook, and I don't know the whole story. I know it is about your friend Jim. I can tell that he was a good friend of yours, and I know that he passed away very young in his life, and I can tell that it had a profound impact on your life. So that's what I want to kind of talk about today.
Yeah.
Because, friends have been a big part of my life. Throughout my school years, like every boy's school years, growing up in India, I had a ton of friends. But more so during my college years where, my parents had to leave, go live abroad for whatever reasons. And, friends become an even bigger part of my life.
Second family.
And,
right?
Yeah. second family,
First
whatever,
family
first
almost.
family almost.
Right.
And even till this day, the friends I made back in like middle school or like high school, they are the ones I keep in touch with. They are all fortunately all in the States, and they live in different parts of the country.
Right.
But anytime I have a problem or some news to share, inevitably, that's where my mind goes, and that's been my support system throughout. So your messages kind of resonate hard with me,
Right.
and that's what I want to talk about today.
It's hard to lose it. Well, so Jim, first of all, Jim Bergstrom was his full name, and interesting kid. My family, as we've talked about the Cubs here. I grew up in Chicago, and when I was in fourth grade, my family moved to Minnesota, and that's hard for a 9-year-old to uproot. My sister was 5, my brother was 1, I guess, at that time, and so we moved to Minnesota. My parents made the decision to move us during the school year so we would make some friends before we went into the summer. Which, whether that was the right decision or not, who knows? But so we moved to Minnesota, and I'm pretty outgoing, but it's still hard for even an outgoing kid to, at 9 years old to kind of move in to meet new friends. And so we move in, and I go to my elementary school, and there's this one kid, Jim, who is tall and blonde hair and actually kind of quiet. But everybody likes him, which is interesting. He's not he doesn't make himself the center of attention, but everybody knows who he is, and he's very well liked. And he came up to me and introduced himself, I remember. And I thought, wow, this is great. Here's this really nice kid, and he played sports, basketball and baseball, and we just kind of clicked. We started talking about sports, and this was fourth grade. And as we got a little older, we were on basketball teams. Actually, no, I take that back. We were never on a basketball team together because he was better than me. He was better than a lot of us. So he was on the travel team. I was on the in-house team. But we played baseball together a couple summers, and got to know him real well. And then we went to high school together, and we were on the track team together. And that was our high school thing. And it was myself and him and 2 other guys. There were 4 of us freshmen that joined track, and specifically we were jumpers, long jump, triple jump, and we formed this really tight bond our freshman year somehow. The 4 of us did, and we were all a little different. My friend Trent, who lives in the Twin Cities still, him and I were sort of more of the goofballs, and Jim was always kind of pulling us back to, hey, we got to practice, we got to do this right. And then there was another kid who was, again, more serious about being an athletic mark. And so the 4 of us, it was just a great friendship bond that kind of started then.
Very early in your life.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we went from being children to being almost young adults, and with Jim it was funny. We all got our driver's license, and at that age, at 16, you start to do stupid things. So who can go 100 miles an hour? And Jim would step on the gas and floor it, and then just stop as soon as he got to the speed limit. And he would go 55 miles an hour, and that was it. No rule breaking. He went fast to get up to there, but there was no rule breaking. And he was one of 4 boys: Dan, Dave, Jim, and Jeff. And all the boys were extremely athletic, very close as a family, and very close to their parents. And he sort of emulated that Midwestern work ethic, family. Just a great person to have as a friend, and probably as a family member too.
What is your favorite memory of Jim, or the image of him that persists? I mean, not just for you, but also the people who got to know him well.
It's funny because we talk about him now a lot, or I still talk about him as much as I can. He would have hated that. He was a private person. The memories that stick the most in my head are either horsing around at track practice, jumping on the high jump mats, or just kind of goofing around. One Saturday, shortly before he passed away, him and I got up really early, and we actually skipped track practice, I think, or we got a permission to do it because Jim would never break the rules. And we skipped track practice, and we went downtown, and we waited in line. The Timberwolves tickets were going on sale that morning. And him and I wanted to go to the Bulls-Timberwolves game. He was a big T-Wolves fan. I was a Bulls fan, and we thought this was great. And so we drove downtown as 16, 17-year-old kids in Minneapolis. We got our orange juice and donuts, and we waited in line, and we talked about the whole season, which was pretty cool. But we actually never got a chance to go to that game because he passed away before the game. And so That's one of my kind of last memories, just of really kind of chatting deep about, and not deep about life, but basketball, and that was fun. And that's what kids should be talking about is
That's as deep as a 16-year-old should be going.
basketball and what you're gonna do for your social studies test, and that's about it. So yeah, that kind of sticks in my mind that was, you know, late fall. So maybe we didn't skip track practice. That would have been somewhere in like August. Maybe I skipped football practice. That's probably what I did. And then he passed away in January. So yeah, we never had a chance to go to that game.
Tell me about what happened.
It's a tough day. It's a tough day then. It's still tough to think about it. So January 19th, 1996. The date sticks in my mind, obviously. And we've talked about, you've seen me post on Facebook about it every year. And I mean, I have felt that it's not my job, but I don't want him to be forgotten. Mm-hmm. He's actually been gone now, I think, more than he died when he was 17. So it's been 20 some years now. It's a cold day. It's a real cold day in the Twin Cities. It was 35 below zero. Wow. It got to be about 60 or 70 below zero with the wind chill, and it was a Friday. And school got canceled. And school was canceled because if you grew up in the Midwest and you take a bus, the buses are diesel. The diesel fuel was gelling, and so they couldn't get the buses started to get the kids to school in the morning, and so they canceled school. And there has to be, in Minnesota, it has to be a real deal to cancel school because they're pretty hardy up there. So they canceled school, but they did not cancel the evening athletics because it was going to warm up to maybe only 10 below by the time of the basketball game, and they could get the buses fired up then and get the other team out of the school. And Jim was on the basketball team, and he played JV. We were juniors in high school, so he was on the JV team, but also played varsity. And JV was interesting because really only parents went to watch the JV. Only the students went to the varsity game, mm-hmm. But JV was kind of for your parents. Well, my friends, Mark and Trent, who we discussed, who were on the track team with us, we always went to the JV game just to kind of needle Jim a little bit. We'd sit in the stands and cheer for him when he'd make a basket and just kind of have a good time. And it was in a back gym, so we had our main gym where the varsity played, and then a back gym, and the JV game played before the varsity. And so my friends and I knew a door we could sneak into in the back of school and avoid paying the $2 fee to get into this basketball game that our parents had given us. They'd given us the money, but I think we saved it and then bought an extra candy bar or something. And so we sneak into this back door and we get into the gym and no one's in the gym. And we always kind of got late because we probably got McDonald's or something. No one's in the gym except for we see somebody on a stretcher and kind of weren't paying attention. There were no teams in there. The parents were out. And then kind of looked a little closer and noticed it was my friend Jim's parents were there and couldn't really see Jim on this stretcher, but he was there. And an athletic trainer happened to be there and kind of grabbed us quickly and took us into the locker room where the team was. And so we were in the locker room and they said, look, they're taking him to the hospital. He has collapsed on the bench. The whole team is going to this captain's house. We know you guys, just come with us. We said, great. And so we left and we kind of drove around. We weren't exactly sure where this house was because we hadn't been there. We got there. The whole team was already there. And a friend of the team, when we walked in, said, I'm sorry, Jim has passed away. And I don't even know how to begin to describe that because we thought he passed out because he had low blood sugar or something happened. And they were taking him to the hospital and they were going to put some fluids in him and he was going to be fine. And to find out that he died was very difficult. Yeah. Difficult, I think, is probably the...
What happened to him?
It's, again, a very interesting thing. And I think that's what made it so hard. Kids dying is nothing new. It's always sad when you hear a kid who passes away, but... we can open the Trib tomorrow, and I'm sure somebody has died who was 17 or 18. But a lot of times, unfortunately, when kids pass away, it's something, maybe a poor choice they have made, either going too fast in a car or experimenting with drugs or alcohol, or maybe they have a disease like cancer or something, and you know this. Um, None of that was the case, and I think that made it more difficult. It turns out Jim had a heart condition called aortic stenosis, which you can Google it. We'd never Google wasn't around then, but we'd never heard of it. And basically, what it is it's the calcification of your aorta to the point to where it just reduces blood flow to your heart. And no one knew he had it. And actually, the interesting thing was his parents knew he had a hole in his heart, and had taken him to a pediatric cardiologist when he was a young teen, which is more than most parents would do because a hole in a heart is actually sort of common. And nothing. They said, yeah, looks good, and no ill will to the doctors, but nothing was ever discovered. And so that night, the way the story goes, we didn't see it go down, but he was running down the court, and he felt lightheaded, and he gave the fist signal, which means, hey, take me out of the game. I need a break. And so he gave the coach the fist. He sat down on the bench, and the coach said, are you all right? And he said, yeah, I just can't catch my breath. And that was it. He passed out in the chair and died. They say that I think maybe they had a heartbeat for a minute there, but he more or less passed away right there. And it's shocking. It's just shocking. And that was the sort of the start of a tough few weeks, I guess.
Tell me about it. Like, he's obviously a very close friend of yours that had passed. Around the time where, like you said, you were all graduating out of invincible, graduating out of being boys to men, I guess,
Right.
For the lack of a better term. Tell me how you and your friends process that.
You talked about having a good group of friends, and that was a positive, I guess, is that there was a pretty tight-knit group of people that we could lean support on. I remember coming home that night. My friends and I drove to this house where we learned, and I walked in the door. My parents had heard because parents were calling parents, obviously, and I told my parents there were no cell phones, obviously, and I walked in, and I remember saying he didn't make it, and that was hard. The next few days, it was on the news. The news people interviewed us as his, really, really good friends. His poor family was going through a very difficult time, not knowing why their son had passed away. There was a funeral that was extremely large because we lived in a suburban city that, like I said, he wasn't exactly the center of attention, but everybody knew who he was. And so his wake and his funeral was very, very well attended. And I think, I had relatives pass away before, but not someone who was my age. And so seeing someone like you, in a casket, I think was hard. It was really hard. And so, I think there was a lot of just questions as to why those next few weeks. Yeah.
And then how, like you said, seeing somebody your age in a casket is hard. Did it change who you were as a young adult?
I think so. I think we all grew up really fast that day, or in the weeks to come. I think it galvanized a friendship. Trent and myself especially, we still stayed in touch with Mark, the other kid who was there, but Trent and I have, we talk probably like the friends that you talked about. We talk a lot more. He has 3 little girls now, and we're still very close. And I think that moment in our lives galvanized a friendship. And I think anybody who's been through this sort of thing will probably see that as a mark on the path of their life is something that maybe alters or changes their life. And it changed us. I think we grew up. I think we probably still did stupid things. But I think maybe we processed it a little more. And I'd like to think that since then, I haven't taken any of the cool things I've done in life for granted. I went to college. I've traveled the world. I've got married. I have a son. All these cool things that he didn't get to do. And I think to have that awareness is important for people to realize everything they do in life is a reward. and that Jim did not get that reward.
And as you, like you said, as you grew up, like, now you see, I mean, you're my age and you see 16-year-old kids all the time, I'm sure.
Right.
Like, has your attitude towards them changed, evolved?
You can't tell a kid that this, I will share this with my son, Dane, as he gets older. And I'm sure he will figure it out for himself. But it's hard. Again, people before my age, I'm sure, had gone through this, and you can't explain to those kids what they have or what they do. I think for me, it's interesting. I'm sad now, and I almost get more sad for for my past self and my past friends, thinking what those kids went through, and how they had to grow up. I mean, it's been 21 years, and so I still miss my friend, but I'm not as sad for that as I am sad for the people that were in that moment. You had a group of 16, 17-year-old kids. You had a family that was extremely tight-knit, who still to this day, I'm sure, is not incomplete, right? You lose a son. And then I look to my own son, and I think, gosh, like, what is there anything inside of him right now that could cause this, and how hard that is to that unknown. Jim's mom told us a story. It's the day that he passed away. He was going into school, and he said he had a headache, and his mom had a bottle of Advil and shook some onto his hand, and like 10 of them flew out, and she said, "Oh, how sick are you?" And like, ha ha ha, and put the rest back and gave him the 2 that he needed. It's just that unknown of what is inside your child and what she would have done had she had known. And again, it's just so sad, and it's just sad to know that there was nothing anybody could have done. Nobody could have lived their life any differently. Now there are operations, obviously, but it was interesting when he passed away. This aortic stenosis. Other people that have it, this calcification doesn't present itself until you're probably our age now, in our 40s. And his case was actually written up in some
Journals?
some journals about how a 17-year-old kid had this rapid calcification, and why did this happen? And so, if there's maybe another positive to come out of it, hopefully that some medical studies have been done that prevent another child from going through this. But yeah.
So I can, it's obvious that, Jim, his memory, his friendship had a profound impact on you and your friends' life. Like, I have lost friends, maybe not at 16, but maybe a little older. And I still think of them fondly, but I mean, he had more of an impact on
Well,
you than
I think I'm sure, like with your friends too, it's hard. Your memories of them stop when I'm 38 and he's still a 17-year-old kid. Like I can't, he never made it to what we are. And that's wherever you lose a friend, that's where the timeline stops, unfortunately. Right before so this was our junior year, before our senior year, baccalaureate, which is the sort of the ceremonial part of graduation that doesn't happen, but before that there's some speeches and stuff, and my classmates had asked if I would speak about Jim, and I did, and I told a couple stories, and I said, the one thing that's really hard to think of is that when we come back here in 20 years, he'll still be a 17-year-old kid who didn't get to do the things we did in life. And so I think that's one of the reasons that you talk about seeing the post on Facebook, is I don't want people to forget who he was, or forget that moment. And so, as people here have families or promoted in business or do whatever they're doing, remember we had this guy who would have been accomplishing all these things with us, and now he isn't. And I think that the good thing, or the thing that makes me happy, is that when I make that post, and I'll try to alter it every year to maybe make it a little different and pull some memories out of different people, it's pretty positive. I get a lot of people say, "Gosh, thanks for reminding me. Oh, I always remember this date." And a friend of mine actually wrote a note to me and sent it in the mail and said how it's always rewarding to see that, and thanks for keeping his memory alive. And it's not anything. If somebody else was doing it, I would feel just as rewarded for it, and I would encourage any of my classmates to post about it too. And I think I just I don't forget the dates. It's when you write down and you say, oh yeah, this is the day.
When we talked maybe a month ago, you told me about this sad incident about somebody you knew from work lost their kid,
Yeah.
and you said something that something about how the kid's friends would remember them. Can you tell me a little bit about what you said and
Yeah,
why?
so this was a young girl who unfortunately passed away in a car accident, and she was 15. And she worked at the company I worked. Her mother worked at the company, and I had been through this as a child, obviously, and the family who had lost this child. There's no amount of sympathy or we're thinking about you. There's nothing you can say will ever change that. It is. Thank you for thinking of us, but here we are. And so I wrote her a letter. And I said, hey, I don't know if this will give you any, um, not closure, but any comfort, is to say that her friends will never stop thinking about her. They'll think about her when they graduate high school in a few years. They'll think about her when they get married. They'll think about her. So just know that hopefully that helps you, that your daughter who didn't make it past 15 will make it. Will continue. Her spirit will continue to go on. In not maybe as like a religious spirit, but her beliefs and people will think about her. And I saw the woman then, and she said, well, how good that made her feel. And I for Jim, for me, I have a picture of him that I carry every day, and so he goes everywhere I go. He's climbed the Great Wall of China. He's been to South America. I accidentally took him scuba diving on the Great Barrier Reef. I forgot to take my wallet out of my shorts. So the picture's a little worse for the wear at this point. But I started, his parents gave all of us a picture of him right at the funeral. And I've carried it every day since then. So
You are a journalist, or you were a journalist.
right,
You are one of the most eloquent speakers I know.
I try.
You write. I know you told me that you tried to document, memorialize, whatever you want to
Yeah.
say, your experience of being friends with Jim and how it's had an impact on you. Uh, tell me what you've tried to do and how far you got and why.
Putting the pen to paper is hard. You can writing a story. You get to the end quickly if you're not a trained author, I guess, and I'm not a trained author. And so I've written down some thoughts and trying to back up this. Where do you start the story, and where do I insert myself in the story? And I've written a few things and it hasn't gone. And I'd like to think one day maybe I can write a book that would just be an interesting story that people would read, and maybe they would relate to parts of it, and maybe it would help me just to write it all down. I was a journalist for the school newspaper and in high school, and I wrote a piece about Jim that was the whole back page the week after he'd passed away. And I've interviewed presidents. I've written some really important stories as a journalist, and that one is in my top 3 by far. And I was 17 when I wrote it, and I think it was a hard piece to write, but it was a good piece. And I still have it. I still have a copy of it. I usually read it around January 19th just to remind me of the time. I in that piece I told a story about Mark and Trent and myself were with Jim. We had went to see our track coach in the summer when we weren't in, and he worked a second job, and he lived a little farther south than we did, and we were able to convince Jim to skip his summer basketball game to go down and see this guy. We saw him, and we had pizza, and we ended up kind of goofing around in this river, and it was just a really fun summer day that I kind of carry with me. And but that piece was important, and I think the writing of the Facebook post, it just helps to continue to talk about things, and I don't want to forget him. He was the first person to reach out to me when I moved to a new city, and that's a big thing. And I think that the way he may have changed how I see relationships, and how important I know relationships are, I think probably helped make me the man I am today.
All I can say is like I hope everybody has a friend like you. I don't think these are stories that should be forgotten. I don't think memories should be forgotten. They need to live on, and you're doing a great job.
Thank you. It's it was humbling to see that somebody who didn't go to school with us, um, and didn't know me when I was young, take something away from that memory. And hopefully that means that he's continuing to help people. I guess however you want to say that, but um, you know, it's going to be 23 years coming up here, and he's still the blonde-haired kid with the big smile who, uh, you know, would not want to be the center of attention, but I can still see him. I can still see shooting basketballs with him. I can still see playing baseball with him, and that's special, and I'm looking forward to seeing the relationships that my young son develops. He's 4 now. When he develops these, and how important those will be at driving his life. And I hope he can take something away, maybe not through a death of a friend, but can take something away from a friendship like this.
And I hope he has friends like Jim.
I do too.